Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Not that you have anything better to do, because during this time of quarantine, there's nothing else that you can do other than come here online and watch me teach things about chess. Okay, so, now let's go ahead and take a look at this game we have picked out for us. So this game was Mikhail Tal as the white pieces, and as the black pieces, Anatoly Karpov. And so this game was a really good one. Well, for Tal, that is. Karpov didn't turn out so well, which I found really sad, because Karpov is one of my favorite players. But in any case, it's still a great game, so let's take a look at it. So, e4, c6, Karpov, he liked the Caro-Kann, so that's what he plays here. c4, and this is kind of a different idea than the normal classical you see usually with d4 and knight c3. The idea is, black wants to put a pawn on d5, so black is going to have to deal with two white pawns already attacking that square. d5, e takes, c takes, c takes, and knight to f6. So, what we're going to see is an isolated queen's pawn position in this game. We already have, well, we actually have two isolated queen's pawns. So doubled isolated queen's pawn position for the time being. Black could immediately have taken with queen takes d5, but there's the knight to c3 getting the tempo on the queen. So black wants to go knight f6 before getting back the pawn. Knight c3, knight takes d5, knight f3, and then knight takes on c3. So I don't think that this was the best choice for Karpov, was to take the knight on c3. And one thing we will see is a lot of mistakes in this game by both players, because this was a rapid game. They weren't taking, as much time as they take during a longer regular game. So, the reason is after white takes, there's no longer the isolated queen's pawn, and instead there's the pawns on the c file and the d file, which you will still have that hanging pawn setup, which hanging pawns is beyond the scope of what we'll cover in this lesson. That's like a whole lesson in itself, is the hanging pawns, hanging square setup. But essentially it's going to give white a pretty decent control of the center in this game. Sometimes they can be weak, sometimes they're strong. g6, d4, and there we go, we got the pawn helping to control center. Bishop on g7, bishop d3, castle kingside, castles, knight c6, and both sides are just developing their pieces. Rook e1. And this type of pawn structure, you see this pawn on e7 can be a bit of a target, and so white goes ahead and attacks it. And pushing it to e6 isn't something that black necessarily wants to do, because then where is this bishop going? And it will take some more time to get that bishop someplace. So, rook e8, bishop g5. White is developing with the harmony of attacking e7. Bishop e6. So this move would appeal in the positional player's mind, because you're thinking, I'm going to block the pawn from the attack of the rook down the e file. Maybe this bishop comes to d5 or c4 one day, and it helps to attack these light squares. And that's what you're thinking. And this bishop does need to get developed someplace. But there's some problems with this move after Tal's move. And maybe you might want to pause for a second here to try to think of what he played, if you like to try to guess the moves. Rook takes e6, an exchange sacrifice, because after this move, all of the pieces are going to work very harmoniously together. And it becomes kind of difficult for black to really get the pieces organized well. Bishop c4, and yeah, this pawn on e6 is a pretty easy target, and the moves are going to come very easily for white. Bishop c4, and after queen d6, queen e2 is played, and you're just ganging up on the pawn on e6. Okay, knight d8 to try to hold the pawn. Actually, one idea is just playing king h8 here, and then black actually isn't so bad. Knight to d8 is a little bit passive. You should just go king h8 and just give up on this e6 pawn, and then black isn't so bad. Rook e1. Rook c8. Knight d2. Alright, so here, Tal is trying to increase the activity of his knight. One interesting idea would have been for him to play bishop d2 in order so that this bishop will then just be defending c3, so there's no rook coming down, and then you can play the bishop back to d3 and run the h-pawn up and try to get into these light squares that you can weaken. In the game, something kind of similar happens, but it's a little bit different. But I just wanted to bring out this variation. Okay, in the game, knight d2, and then king to h8, knight e4, queen c7, bishop b3, e5, h4, e takes, and then h5. So h5 and running the pawn up does happen, but the bishop is over here on b3, not on d3. Now, I had the idea that maybe on d3 there's different things going on, but let's just let's keep going. G takes h5. Yeah, so this move was not so great. So this is simply it's not so good. After defending for a while, it can become difficult to keep playing the best moves. And in this case, this just weakens the king. Okay. Queen takes h5. And right here, actually, white misses a chance as well. So, in the game, queen takes h5 was played, but there's a really good tactic here if you want to look for it. You can try to find it, and I'm going to give the answer now, though, so maybe you want to pause or something. Knight to f6, and the idea is that there is the pin on the e file here, which you can't forget about, because the pawn can't take, and if bishop takes, then the bishop will take, and this pawn is not really defending on f6. And if black just plays something like rook to f8, there is knight takes h7 when the king cannot capture because of queen takes h5. Alright, so back to the actual game. Queen takes h5. Rook f8. Bishop c2, queen e5. Knight g3, queen to e1. Okay, so he does give up the rook because his idea is to try to displace the queen from defending the king side. Interestingly, though, it actually is completely even right here. But black missed the chance to defend him. So unfortunately, Karpov wasn't able to fan the move that actually completely balances out the game here. So in the game, h6 is played, which is the losing move. But if you'd like to try to find the actual saving move, maybe you want to pause for a minute and try to figure it out. But there's one move here, and if black plays it, it's completely even. Bishop to h6. The idea is this, just that you're giving up the bishop so that if takes, you have rook to f7, and then you're just defending horizontally and perfectly even. But in the game, h6 was played, a losing. That's probably the last mistake that makes the game a losing move. That move, a losing move there. Okay, bishop takes king g8. And now the black king is just too open here. queen to h7 check, king f7. And then we'll just get to the final position here. Bishop h6 check. And yeah, this is where the game ends. So both players did miss a few chances in this game. And so you might say that's somewhat lower of a skill level for players that were world champions. But it was also a rapid game, so if they're playing faster, they still were playing good for the amount of time that they had. And so don't think that these players just weren't playing very strong moves, and that's why I kept saying, like, missing chances. It's because they're playing with less time. Still better than I could play with that amount of time. And it's also really instructive because, you saw Tal just had all of his pieces organized in a way that all worked harmoniously towards the same goal. So that's probably one of the main themes of this game, is finding and creating harmony between your pieces. And that's what Tal was able to do after he made that exchange sacrifice. Alright, so thanks for watching, everybody, and go ahead and subscribe to my channel and all of that stuff that people usually say. Alright, bye.